I'm Anna Maria Horner. I am a fabric designer as well as a quilt designer and sewing pattern author. And today I want to share with you one of my favorite techniques to create a patchwork quilt, and that is combining simple patchwork with appliqué. One of my favorite patterns that I've done this year is a quilt that I call the plot twist quilt. And it's a combination of striped patchwork background, so really straightforward patchwork, with some overlay of appliqué. And that striping itself actually sort of dictates the height of this row of ovals that I have on it. And that sawtooth design, just a simple row of half square triangles, sort of makes this really simple line down the center. And I've really continued to play with those elements in other quilts that I've made. You can see that the vines that grow around this one are very organic, and I did them all with machine appliqué, raw edges and fusible. And I've continued to do another version of this quilt where I've actually switched the elements and had one single vine in the center, which really grew some big flowers, and I just went wild with the different styles of appliqué on it. But again, all machine appliqué, so not too labor intensive. And then I set those sawtooth strips down the sides of it instead. And then I also have this smaller quilt here that was made by my friend Pam Matthews. It's really beautiful. Again, all the same elements of design. I have the striped background, a row of ovals that the height of are dictated by the height of the stripes, and vines growing around them, and a completely different style of florals. So I like that I'm building this structure, but then kind of just going for it with the different floral shapes and appliqué. This one is actually also done on the machine, but it's done with that clear thread and with a really tiny blind stitch, so it's almost completely invisible. And then we did the sawtooth just out to the side on this one. Now, if you like handwork, you are more than welcome to do your appliqué by hand. This is actually a different design that I call the cross-country quilt, and this one was completely hand appliquéed and needle turned down, and I also hand quilted this one as well. So today what I wanted to share with you is just some little tips and tricks about what I'm thinking about as I'm putting together one of these quilts, both in the design and just the straightforward techniques of good things to have in mind as you're chopping up your patchwork background. So you can see that I have this piece started here, kind of setting forth that same structure of background stripes and an oval shape. And today I even let this one big stripe further have some smaller stripes within it. And I've decided to do an oval, again, that's the same height of it. And the first step that I'm gonna do for the appliqué, now that I've got my patchwork background finished, is just to machine baste it in place at the edges. So just about 1/4 inch away from the edges. And the cool thing about that is it's gonna end up getting hidden in the vines that I put on it in just a minute. So why don't we sew that? So I have my machine set with just the regular foot and a long basting stitch. And if you want to pin this in place, you can, but I feel pretty confident about just getting started. So again, 1/4 inch from the edge. Just slowly baste around that curve. Okay, there's really no reason to do any sort of back tacking on this. I'm gonna do something a little bit different with this piece than I have with the others, and I'm actually gonna recycle that patchwork oval that's in the back because we've layered up on top of this center portion here, and I'm gonna reuse it by cutting it away. I just have a small sharp pair of scissors here. If you have some special appliqué scissors, you could use them here, but I'm just gonna carefully cut, making sure I only go through one layer on the inside of the seam that luckily you can see from the back. Start with just the tiniest snip. The good thing about this shape that we're cutting out is that it's gonna end up having its edges covered by the vine where I reused it on the front. There aren't any really special considerations that you need to make to finish these edges. with all these seams coming in here, because we're going to be going back over this again with the vine sewing. So it's really going to secure all of our patchwork edges down. So you can see I've cut away this oval here, and I want to reuse it over here, but I'm only going to use it half on each side. So I'm just going to fold it in half here. This is my favorite part of patchwork and applique, is kind of making it up as I go. And I did have this idea planned when I got started, but I just love the process of kind of getting lost in the details of design. So now I have two little half ovals that I can just turn this way and that way. Now, you could use fusible and put these in place, because you're not going to go in necessarily and cut out those background pieces, because you don't really need to use them unless you just want them and want to conserve your bits. But I want to show you a trick that I use to get the vines ready to be curved and sewn into place, because the next design step and piecework step is that we're going to be sewing these vines in. Now, I've cut these from the bias about 1.5 inches wide, and I've already pressed their backs back, or their side edges back, by about a 1/4 inch seam allowance and made a nice press. Okay, I'm just going to spray a little fabric smoother on it. Will help me out. Okay, just grab my iron. So I want this stem to fall about halfway on each side of my edge here. So I'm really just going to hold it, and the outer bigger curve is the one that has to stretch the most. So I put my hands on that and kind of tug at it as I turn and press. It is actually amazing the curves that you can get this bias to take if you really work with it. And then I'm sort of curving back the other way. Look how beautifully that holds in. And what I think is really cool when you have a stripe or a plaid is you can actually see them take a bend in the design. You can see all those little lines from that grid work kind of turning and bending. So that's the exact same process that you would use to do the other vine. And I like to interlock my vines. So if I lay this one here and do the same pressing process, I've overlapped it here, and I'll keep pressing around to get that curve here. But before I go to stitch it, when it passes over the vine on this side, I want it to pass under. So it's a really cool design opportunity to use 2 different fabrics for your vines. Have one passing under and have one passing over. So I'm just going to flip it like that. So here you might want to pop in a couple of pins. And then I have gotten to where I really like using the decorative stitches on the machines as another design element. So I'm going to switch that out at the machine and choose a really pretty one. So I can use this little red guide on the foot to help me keep the design of the decorative stitch on the edge here. So you just continue sewing down both sides of each of the vines, and let me show you what that stitch looks like. So you can see here, actually I chose one that's kind of like a little cross stitch. And choosing different colors of threads are something that you can do as a whole nother design element, but you can see that decorative stitch gives a really nice securing of those raw edges underneath, and also the patchwork that's floating behind. So I hope that this has inspired you to try out some different combinations of patchwork and applique in your quilting.